Let's start by quickly taking a look at our existing module and then creating a new one. I've created this new project called third-project in the same directory, and I've done an ng-serve, and I've cleared out the stuff that the Angular CLI generates for us. There is one in app.component.html. All this markup, I've cleared them out, and then app.component.ts, I've cleared out this one line. So it's a clean slate. Now let's look at app.module.ts. I told you in Unit 1 that the module is basically a thing that consolidates different components. It does a lot more than that, but I want you to think about a module as some kind of a container, some kind of a namespace, which contains these different things. In this case, app component is the only component in my freshly generated Angular CLI project, and that has been declared in the module, app module. So app component is a part of app module. You can create multiple modules in a project, and each module is going to contain components within it. It's going to contain a lot more, but we've been looking at just components so far. So assume that app module is a container for app component. You can create other modules which are containers for other components. When you build an application, you don't just create one module. If it's a simple application, yeah, you can probably get away with it. But if you're building anything fairly complex, having everything be in one module is going to drive you crazy. You want some kind of a breakdown. You want to organize your code so that you build feature modules, which are basically a group of related components, for example, which serve a certain purpose, which provide a certain feature. So you can add stuff to that feature module which are related to that feature, and then anybody who needs that feature just uses that module. So this is how you typically create a module. You create a class, and then you have the ng module annotation, and in this annotation you pass in an object. We've looked at declarations, which is basically all the components that are a part of this module, and app component is part of it. You created multiple other components before, and then those components also get listed over here. This is an array, so this can contain as many components as you want to be associated with this module. Now let's look at this other section here called imports. Imports is basically you establishing a dependency on other modules. So let's say you've broken down your features into sub-modules, right? So let's say you're creating an application which is address book application, and then you have one module which manages all the address card UI. So we can have that be a separate module called address card module, and your application module needs to have that module imported in it, right? So you need to say something like address card module to say that this module needs all the stuff that's in the address card module. When you import a module, you get to use the components in that module. So I'm going to give a demonstration by creating a couple of modules and adding components to them. So let me create a module called, let's say I'm going to call it view module, all right? So I'm going to use Angular CLI to create a module. Just like you did ng generate component, you can also use ng generate module to create a module. So I'm going to say ng generate module. I'm going to call it view. Hit enter. Now it's created a folder called view, and it's created a module class within it. So this is view.module.ts. This is called view module, and it does not have any declarations. There are no components associated with it now. It's a plain module. It does have one imports though. It's imported this common module, which I'm going to come and revisit in a little bit. But apart from this one import, this module is essentially empty. Now I could create a component inside this view module. So let me do that. I'm going to create ng generate component. Let me call this view component. If I just do this, by default, the Angular CLI is going to generate the component in the app module, because that's where the root is, right? I'm executing this command from the root, so it is going to assume that this component needs to be in the app module. But what if I want to create this component in the view module? All I need to do is prefix the component name with the name of the module and then follow it with a slash. So now I'm telling Angular CLI to create that component in the view slash view component. So this is the name of the component, and this is the name of the module within which that component needs to reside. So if I hit enter, Angular is going to do everything that you would expect it to do. It's created a component in view slash view component directory. It's created 4 files: CSS, HTML, spec, and component.ts. And notice the module that it updates. It doesn't update app module anymore. It updates view slash view.module.ts. And if you look at your view module code, you see it's added this view component. Well, that's because I added the component in the name. I shouldn't have done that, but well, it's okay. It's just the name. So what it's done is, let me close the app component so that I'm not using that. Here in view, it's created a view component, and this is the name of that class. And in the view module, it's added that to the declarations. This is what you've seen the Angular CLI do for app module, but now it's doing it for view module because I've asked it to do it for the view module here with a view slash. You can of course do this manually. You don't have to depend on the Angular CLI. What you would need to do is create this folder, and then in the view.module.ts, you would declare that class in the declarations node. Now, this view component is a part of the view module. Because the view component is a part of the view module and it's not a part of the app module, here's where something interesting happens. Let's look at the view component. The selector of this thing is app-view-component, right? Now what happens if I use app-view-component in my app module, which is at the root? Earlier, this used to work. We would create a component in the app module and then use that component selector in app.component.html. That would work just fine. But now, if I were to try doing an ng-serve and I load the page, it's not going to work and I'm going to get an error. What does this error say? The error is a template parse error. It says app-view-component is not a known element. If app-view-component is an Angular component, then verify that it's a part of this module. Well, right now, app-view-component is an Angular component, but it is not a part of the module. You look at app.module.ts, there is nothing about the app-view-component here at all. Where is it? It's in the view module. So if I were to create another component in the view module and use that selector app-view-component, it's going to work perfectly fine. Since this component is a part of this module, it's going to be available to all the components of that module. But if you were to take it out and use it in the app module, it's not going to work because the app module has no idea about this view component thingy. Now, how do you tell app module to use that thing? How do you import that component into this module? But you do this by importing the module itself. The name of the module is view module. Now, if you were to tell Angular that your app module is actually dependent on the view module, it's using a component of the view module. Now, how do you declare the dependency? You declare it by importing that module. That's where this imports section comes in. Here I can say that I'm importing view module. Import it from this relative path. I'm going to press save. Well, it still doesn't work. Why not? That's because the view module is using the component, but it is not exporting it. You need to somehow tell the view module to also export the component so that it's used by other people. You do this by another node here in this ng module definition that we haven't looked at so far, which is the exports. Exports is another configuration item, just like all these other stuff you've seen. This is also an array, but it takes in an array of components rather. And here you see I've declared this array. It's basically saying this component is okay for use outside the module. So anybody who's importing this view module also gets access to this component. Now guess what? This component shows up. This is how you create a component in a module and have it used outside the module. There are a couple of things you're going to have to do. First, the module that needs it needs to import whatever module the component is declared in. And secondly, whatever module the component is declared in has to export the component. Note the difference in what is being imported and what's being exported. What is being imported is the module itself. You're telling your module to import another module. And what is being exported is a component. In the module that contains the component, you need to have an exports declaration which says that you're exporting this particular component. When this happens, a component which is declared in one module is usable in another module. Before we wrap up this video, I want to highlight one difference between two kinds of imports that's happening over here. There are two types of imports that you see in this file. The first import is what you have at the very top. You're doing an import of a class from another file, and this is a TypeScript import. Whenever you're using a type in any TypeScript code, you need to import the type. And this is irrespective of whether you're using Angular or any other framework. As long as you're dealing with TypeScript, you need to import the types in order to use them, whatever be the use. The second import that you see is the Angular import, where you're using the Angular syntax in order to use a module inside another module. And this is what we looked at in this video, right? So Angular expects you to declare intermodule dependencies by saying one module imports another module. And this is Angular specific syntax. It's this configuration object that goes into the @ngModule annotation. Both these imports are required in this case. The Angular import is to really achieve what you're trying to do here, which is to get one module to be used in another module. But in order to specify the name of the class, you have to do the TypeScript import to keep the TypeScript compiler happy. All right, so if you just do the TypeScript import, it really doesn't affect Angular module import, right? It's just, you're just making the class available to use in this file. But unless you pass it to the Angular syntax, Angular wouldn't know that that module exists, and you want the dependency to be established. So in order to tell Angular, you need to use the import inside the ngModule syntax. I hope this is clear. I see some confusion that people usually have when it comes to these two imports. Just realize that one is a TypeScript import in order to use the class, and the second is the Angular import, which is the actual usage of the class. And you're using that to establish intermodule dependencies in Angular.